Have you ever watched a cartoon and thought, oh my god, what a sad ending? Do you remember that some cartoons have endings that can simply shatter your childhood? Guys, today we're here once again to disturb your happy memories a bit. We're bringing you part 2 of cartoons with extremely sad and tragic endings. And we warn you up front that there's a high chance of ruining your childhood. So proceed at your own risk. The Powerpuff Girls. One case that almost no one remembers is the episode of the Powerpuff Girls that was simply banned in the USA. In this episode, we see the city of Townsville being completely taken over by absolutely all the villains at the same time. See Me, Feel Me, Know Me is the title of this episode. After failing to make the city safe, we see the girls giving up all their powers to a mysterious gnome in exchange for the apparent peace of the city. It's a kind of pact, kinda sinister. Then we see some really bizarre things, like a cult that worships this mysterious gnome, Professor Utonium working as a butcher, and other very strange things. In the end, even without powers, they manage to defeat the gnome, but in return, all the villains return to the city, and the show implies that, in a way, they are necessary. In other words, it shows that the girls' lives will always be about fighting villains and their evil deeds. Townsville will forever be a place where good and evil will be battling. The funny thing is that this episode was planned to be the last of the Powerpuff Girls. That's because the producers believed it would be the final season of the show for all time. But then the series was renewed for another season. Anyway, this was the 11th episode of the 5th season, and besides being bizarre, it's quite sad. And I'll tell you right now that today's list includes another extremely sad episode of the Powerpuff Girls. Dinosaurs. Anyone who lived in the 90s must have heard at least once,
"Good morning, my family who loves me."
Not the mama.
That's a trademark of Dinosaurs, a series that portrayed the life of a typical middle-class family, but in the prehistoric era with dinosaurs instead of people. The series was full of comedy and adult jokes that may make more sense to you today. The funniest part is that the series was kind of, let's say, realistic, and it portrayed what actually happened to the dinosaurs: extinction. And the last episode of the 4-season series is exactly that. The family's last day of life since the meteor that would wipe out all life had already hit the planet, and the climate was getting colder as there was no more access to the sun, just like what happened in the extinction of the dinosaurs thousands or millions of years ago. Yes, my friends, if you didn't know, the last episode of Dinosaurs was the last because they didn't survive it. Quite sad.
Good night. Goodbye.
Ed, Edd and Eddy. This cartoon was definitely one of the craziest ever created. In it, we saw the 3 friends, Ed, Edd, and Eddy, who had the same name but different nicknames, always going to great lengths to earn some cash to buy jawbreakers. Despite the whole show being very strange, it was a hit on Cartoon Network, but the last episode of this cartoon was definitely the weirdest of all. Similar to the case of the Powerpuff Girls, we have an ending that the creator thought would be the actual ending, but it wasn't. It's just the last episode of the 4th season. That's because Cartoon Network decided to make 2 more seasons and then even a movie, which was indeed the end, but not what was originally planned by the creator. The last episode of the 4th season is called The Eds Are Coming. In this episode, the 3 friends come up with a plan to make money by providing professional advice to their neighborhood peers. Throughout the episode, strange things happen, and Eddy suddenly turns into an old man after a bunch of things fall on his head. And not just him, but everyone else becomes old too. He later reverts back to being a teenager, at least in his mind, and shortly after becomes old again. And then he accepts that he truly is an old man and goes to play cards with his 2 friends, Ed and Ed. And that's the end of the episode, with everyone literally very old.
You're not Granddad! You're me!
Do you know what this means? That the entire show was simply Ed's memories and nothing more? And that they hadn't been young for 90 years? In other words, in addition to a sad ending, the cartoon revealed that all the episodes were not happening in the present moment. Very sad. The Simpsons. Being an adult-oriented cartoon, The Simpsons has many episodes with funny but nonetheless tragic ending. One of them is the 9th episode of the 23rd season, called Holidays of Future Past. In this episode, we witness something that can sometimes be very scary, especially when it happens to animated characters: aging. We see a timeline through Christmas photos of the Yellow family, and we can see that over the years, Bart simply becomes a new Homer, including in the appearance of his face and his growing belly. And we see that Homer himself starts to resemble Grandpa Simpson more and more.
Just see those sleigh bells jingle and ring, tingle, tingling too.
The episode is quite sad as it shows a divorced Bart with 2 kids who don't like being with him.
Mom says you have to watch us over the holidays. She says you're our dad and you need to act like it. Christmas with you is gonna suck.
Living in his old school where he studied, jobless and completely unsuccessful.
You're 2 weeks late on the rent, Bart. Not to mention that geography report from 30 years ago.
Don't worry.
Additionally, Lisa is having trouble with her teenage daughter, and Maggie is going into labor with a baby girl. The episode was meant to be a series finale, which we know didn't happen since it was over 10 years ago, but surely this was one of the saddest, if not the saddest, episodes of The Simpsons. Codename Kids Next Door. K&D was another cartoon that certainly left its mark on many of us during our childhood. The final episode, which is actually a 44-minute special, is called Operation Interviews, the 13th episode of the 6th season. The episode title indicates that it truly was the last one. It all starts with all the members of the group gathered, but they are real people, and most notably, they are adults in their advanced years. They begin to reminisce about Operation Interviews, which are the snippets that are transformed into animations. The episode is somewhat complex and involves the kids from their neighborhood, all the villains, a wild chase for a cake, betrayals, and the children's lunar base. The fact is, in the end, Number 1 is sent to the Galactic K&D as a promotion. His parents show up to say goodbye, and the agent who seemed to be a scientist tells him he won't be able to come back to see his friends from the team ever again. Then, the show returns to the reunited team members as real people, now old, and Number 5 receives a phone call, and it was Number 1 saying he was coming back to see the team.
We'll meet you up on the moon base, okay? Oh, and Number 1, welcome back.
In other words, they spent at least 35 to 40 years without the team getting together, indicating that Number 1 had actually permanently moved away from all his friends. Guys, this is really sad. Friends were separated for decades. That's what happens when we grow up. It's life. Looney Tunes. In an episode of the old Bugs Bunny cartoon called Devil May Hare, we see Daffy Duck making plans to marry a wealthy widow and inherit her fortune. Bugs Bunny overhears the plan and decides to teach the mustachioed little guy a lesson. However, it seems like Bugs goes too far and ends up dropping a heavy safe on Daffy, sending him straight to hell. There, he makes a literal deal with the devil to escape and put Bugs Bunny in his place. But he always returns to hell instead of bringing the clever rabbit in his place. At the end of the episode, we see Daffy actually accepting to stay in the place of eternal torment because he thought it was better than trying to catch Bugs Bunny.
If you want him, you can get him yourself. I'm staying.
In other words, the guy was literally condemned to hell. Can you believe it? That's a very sad ending. At least for him. Woody Woodpecker. There are a few episodes where Woody Woodpecker doesn't fare well, but we've chosen the one that might have been the end for the poor red-headed bird. In an episode where Woody is freezing from the cold, he needs to burn things in his house's fireplace to avoid literally freezing to death. At a certain point, he has to burn the family photo album. Then he sees a picture of Uncle Scrooge, his rich uncle who lives in a warm house. The problem is, to do that, he needs to get rid of the butler, which he manages to do in the end, becoming the new butler for his rich and stingy uncle. However, when he mistakenly drops several sugar cubes into the old man's tea, he gets a series of beatings on the head for wasting sugar. As a result, he simply goes back to his cold and freezing house and burns the last page of the family album, the picture of his rich and tight-fisted uncle, and we see the flames slowly fading away while Woody Woodpecker is nearly frozen, which means he probably died of cold. Oh my God, what a sad ending for poor Woody Woodpecker. The Powerpuff Girls. In the episode Twisted Sister, the girls are tired of fighting crime and decide to create a 4th Powerpuff Girl on their own. So they gather all the ingredients used to make the 3 of them and create a single girl, Bunny. Bunny is stronger and bigger than her sisters, and unfortunately, she has a resemblance to the Hunchback of Notre Dame. But despite all this, she has a good heart and is innocent, and in the end of the episode, she defeats all the criminals. However, because she wasn't created with the correct ingredients, she ends up exploding. Yes, you heard that right. Bunny explodes into a huge beam of light, leaving only a small piece of her dress behind, which was purple in color. Poor Bunny, how sad. Guys, these were 8 more tragic endings of cartoons that surely ruined your sweet childhood. Do you remember any of these endings? Let us know down below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Until next time, bye-bye.